Why do some people almost never post pictures of themselves online? In a world where everyone is documenting their food, vacations, relationships, bodies, and achievements, these people stay almost invisible. They watch, they observe, they scroll, but they rarely feel the need to be seen. And most people misunderstand this. They assume it means insecurity, shyness, or a lack of confidence. But psychology is rarely that simple. Because sometimes what a person refuses to show reveals more than what they show. Social media rewards visibility with likes, comments, attention, and validation. But some people simply don't need to participate in that exchange. They understand something most people forget. You don't have to display your life to prove you're living it. But here's the interesting part. People who rarely post photos don't all think the same way. Some protect their privacy. Some reject validation. Some avoid comparison. Some are simply selective about who gets access to their lives. And yes, sometimes it can come from insecurity. So the real question isn't, why don't they post? It's, what does their silence reveal about the way they think? And once you understand that, their digital invisibility starts to look very different. The first thing you notice about people who rarely post their photos is that they often seem disconnected from the endless need for approval that dominates social media. While millions of people constantly upload pictures, hoping for likes, comments, compliments, or recognition, these individuals may have learned something different. Their sense of value does not have to come from an audience. They can appreciate themselves without waiting for hundreds of strangers to confirm that they look good, that their life is interesting, or that they are doing well. Think about what happens when someone posts a photograph. The moment it goes online, the mind begins anticipating a response. Who will like it? Who will comment? How many people will see it? Why did this person like someone else's picture but ignore mine? Why hasn't anyone reacted yet? These questions can appear small, but repeated over time, they can create a powerful psychological dependency. Attention becomes a form of emotional currency. The more you receive, the better you feel. The less you receive, the more you question yourself. People who don't post may have stepped outside that cycle. They don't necessarily hate social media, and they aren't automatically more confident than everyone else. They simply may not believe that their self-worth needs to be publicly measured. They can take a picture and keep it private. They can have an incredible experience without proving it happened. They can look good without needing hundreds of people to say so. Their satisfaction comes from the experience itself, rather than the reaction surrounding it. There is a major psychological difference between enjoying validation and depending on validation. Everyone likes to be appreciated. Compliments feel good. Recognition feels good. Positive attention feels good. The problem begins when those things become necessary for maintaining your confidence. If your mood depends on how many people reacted to your latest picture, then you have given strangers influence over your emotional state. Your confidence becomes something other people can raise or lower with a tap on a screen. The person who doesn't constantly seek that attention may be developing a stronger internal reference point. Instead of asking, "Do people think I look good?" they may ask, "Do I like how I look?" Instead of asking, "Do people think my life is impressive?" they may ask, "Am I satisfied with the life I'm building?" That shift seems simple, but psychologically it changes everything. The source of judgment moves from the outside world to the individual. This is why some people can appear strangely calm about their online presence. They don't need to constantly remind everyone that they exist. They aren't worried about disappearing from people's feeds. They understand that being noticed and being valuable are two completely different things. Attention is temporary. One post gets attention today and is forgotten tomorrow. But self-respect doesn't have to follow that same cycle. They may also recognize that constant self-presentation creates pressure. Once you begin building an online image, you may feel obligated to maintain it. If you always present yourself as successful, you become uncomfortable showing failure. If you always appear happy, you may hide difficult moments. If you constantly display confidence, you may become afraid of revealing uncertainty. Eventually, you aren't simply living your life, you are managing a character. People who avoid posting themselves may be less interested in managing that character. They would rather experience their lives than continuously document them. Their confidence may exist quietly, without announcements, captions, or public approval. And when confidence doesn't require an audience, it becomes much harder for the outside world to control. People who rarely post their photos often have a different relationship with privacy. In a world where sharing has become almost automatic, they may have consciously or unconsciously decided that not every part of their life deserves an audience. They understand that visibility is not the same thing as importance. Just because something matters to them doesn't mean everyone else needs to know about it. Their relationships, routines, achievements, struggles, plans, and personal moments can remain private without feeling incomplete. Social media has created a strange expectation that experiences become more meaningful when they are displayed. A vacation feels incomplete without photographs. A relationship feels more real when it is publicly announced. A birthday feels more significant when everyone can see the celebration. Even personal achievements can become something to broadcast immediately. But private people often reject this idea. They don't necessarily need documentation to validate their experiences. They can enjoy something without turning it into content. There is also a psychological advantage to controlling information. The less you reveal, the fewer assumptions people can make about you. When everyone knows where you are, what you are doing, who you are with, and what you are planning, you give them a detailed map of your life. Sometimes that information is harmless. Sometimes it isn't. People can misunderstand it, judge it, gossip about it, compare themselves to it, or use it to form opinions about you without actually knowing you. A private person may understand that information creates access. Every photograph reveals something. Your location reveals where you spend time. Your friends reveal your social circle. Your relationship posts reveal who matters to you. Your achievements reveal what you value. Your daily updates reveal your routines. Individually, these details may seem meaningless, but together they create a surprisingly complete picture of your life. Someone who values privacy may simply decide that this picture doesn't need to be available to everyone. There is another reason privacy can become psychologically important. It gives people room to change. When you announce everything publicly, you create an invisible pressure to remain consistent with the identity you have presented. You said you were starting something, so people expect you to finish it. You showed everyone a relationship, so people may ask questions when it changes. You presented yourself as successful, so admitting failure becomes harder. You created an image, and eventually you may feel responsible for protecting it. A private person has more freedom to experiment because fewer people are watching. They can change their mind without explaining themselves. They can fail without announcing the failure. They can start again without giving anyone an update. They can build something quietly until it becomes strong enough to speak for itself. This isn't necessarily about being mysterious. It's about preserving psychological freedom. Privacy can also protect relationships. When every disagreement, celebration, or emotional moment becomes public, the relationship begins to involve an audience. Other people may form opinions about situations they don't understand. Friends may take sides. Strangers may judge. Even positive attention can create pressure. A person who keeps relationships private may understand that intimacy becomes weaker when too many people are invited into it. There is something powerful about having experiences that belong only to you and the people who were actually there. Not everything needs to be translated into a photograph, caption, or public story. Some moments gain their value precisely because they remain untouched by outside opinions. The memory belongs to the people who experienced it rather than to everyone who happened to see it online. This doesn't mean everyone who posts is careless with privacy, and it doesn't mean everyone who avoids posting is psychologically secure. People have different reasons for sharing or remaining private. But when someone consistently keeps their personal life away from social media, it can reveal a strong preference for control over exposure. They decide what information leaves their private world, who receives it, and when it becomes available. In an environment designed to reward constant visibility, choosing privacy can become an act of independence. You don't have to explain where you've been. You don't have to prove who you're with. You don't have to show what you're building. You don't have to turn every meaningful moment into evidence for an audience. You can allow certain parts of your life to exist without public interpretation, without comparison, and without the pressure of being watched. People who rarely post their photos often occupy an interesting psychological position. They observe more than they reveal. While social media encourages people to constantly present themselves, these individuals may be more comfortable standing outside the performance. They watch what others share, notice how people behave, recognize patterns, and collect information without feeling the same need to constantly provide information about themselves. Their silence does not necessarily mean they have nothing to say. Sometimes it means they are paying attention. Every photograph, caption, story, and update reveals something about the person who posts it. The choice of what to show can reveal priorities, insecurities, relationships, ambitions, and even emotional states. Someone may repeatedly post achievements because recognition matters deeply to them. Another person may constantly post about relationships because they want reassurance that the relationship is valued. Someone else may carefully display an expensive lifestyle because they want to communicate status. None of these behaviors automatically reveal the complete truth, but patterns begin to appear when you watch consistently. The person who isn't constantly presenting themselves has more opportunity to study those patterns. They aren't spending as much mental energy wondering how they appear to everyone else. Instead, they can focus on what everyone else is doing. This creates a subtle shift in attention. The performer asks, "How am I being perceived?" The observer asks, "What is happening here?" That difference can completely change the way someone experiences social environments. Observation also requires patience. Most people react quickly to what they see. They read a post, form an opinion, and move on. A more observant person may notice what happens repeatedly. They aren't interested in one isolated action as much as the pattern behind it. Someone might post constantly for several weeks and then suddenly disappear. Someone might become unusually active after a breakup. Someone might begin changing their image whenever they enter a new social group. Someone might present confidence online, but behave very differently in person. These contradictions are where observation becomes valuable. People are often more complicated than the identities they display. Social media gives everyone the ability to edit their presentation, but behavior across time is much harder to control. A person can choose the perfect photograph, the perfect caption, and the perfect moment, but consistency eventually reveals more than presentation. The quiet observer has time to notice that consistency. This doesn't mean people who don't post are secretly analyzing everyone around them. Many simply don't care enough to participate. But some develop a habit of watching without immediately reacting. They become comfortable sitting back and allowing information to come toward them. Instead of rushing to make themselves known, they let other people reveal themselves naturally. There is psychological strength in not needing to fill every silence. When someone is constantly talking, posting, explaining, or displaying themselves, they can unintentionally reveal more than they realize. But someone who is comfortable remaining quiet gives others room to speak. And when people feel there is no competition for attention, they often reveal more of themselves. Think about a conversation where one person talks constantly and another listens carefully. The listener may appear less active, but they are often collecting far more information. They notice word choices, emotional reactions, contradictions, hesitation, enthusiasm, and changes in tone. They aren't necessarily trying to manipulate anything. They are simply paying attention. The same principle can apply online. A person who doesn't constantly post themselves may also have less attachment to the identity they present publicly. Because they aren't continually maintaining an image, they can observe other people's images without feeling compelled to compete. They don't need to prove that their vacation is better, their relationship is happier, their career is more successful, or their life is more exciting. That removes some of the psychological noise that makes genuine observation difficult. And there is another important element, curiosity. When you don't immediately judge everything you see, you can become curious about what lies underneath it. Why does this person need so much attention? Why does that person rarely reveal anything? Why does someone's personality change depending on the audience? Why does someone constantly announce what they are going to do, but rarely show the results? Questions create awareness. The person who observes carefully understands that people communicate even when they aren't speaking directly. Their choices communicate. Their timing communicates. Their consistency communicates. Their reactions communicate. And sometimes what someone refuses to show can be just as interesting as what they choose to display. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone or to treat social media like a psychological investigation. It's simply to recognize that observation becomes difficult when you are obsessed with being observed yourself. When your attention is constantly focused on your own image, you miss the subtle information surrounding you. But when you become comfortable being less visible, you can sometimes see more clearly what other people are revealing. People who rarely post their photos may have a strong separation between who they are in real life and who they appear to be online. They don't necessarily feel the need to turn their personality, appearance, achievements, relationships, or daily experiences into a carefully managed digital identity. While social media encourages people to construct an image of themselves for public consumption, some individuals are far more comfortable allowing their real identity to exist outside the screen. The difference matters because an online profile is rarely a complete representation of a human being. It is a selection. You choose the photograph where you look your best. You choose the moment that makes your life appear exciting. You choose the words that communicate confidence. You remove the things that don't fit the image. Eventually, the profile begins to look like a person without actually containing the complexity of that person. Real human beings are contradictory. They can be confident one day and uncertain the next. They can be successful while privately struggling. They can love their lives and still have difficult moments. They can be ambitious, afraid, happy, disappointed, generous, selfish, disciplined, and confused at different times. But social media often rewards consistency of image. It encourages you to become a recognizable version of yourself that people can quickly understand. The person who doesn't post much may be less interested in that process. They don't need their online profile to explain who they are. Their identity doesn't depend on maintaining a particular appearance in front of an audience. They can walk away from the screen and still feel like themselves. This creates an important psychological distinction between identity and image. Your identity is who you believe you are when nobody is watching. Your image is the version of yourself you want other people to see. There is nothing inherently wrong with having an image. Everyone manages impressions to some degree. The problem begins when the image becomes more important than the identity underneath it. When that happens, people can begin making decisions based on perception rather than reality. Instead of asking, what do I actually want? They ask, how will this look? Instead of experiencing a moment, they think about how it will photograph. Instead of choosing something because it matters to them, they choose it because it communicates status, attractiveness, success, or popularity. Slowly, life can become a performance. The person who keeps their photos private may be protecting themselves from that pressure. They can enjoy an experience without thinking about how it will appear to others. They can wear something because they like it, travel because they want to experience the place, celebrate because they are genuinely happy, and pursue a goal without needing to announce it. There is also freedom in not having to maintain an online identity. Imagine changing your interests, your career direction, your appearance, your social circle, or your priorities without thousands of people watching the transition. You can evolve without explaining every step. You don't have to convince anyone that the new version of you is legitimate because you never promised them that you would remain the same. This is particularly important because people often become prisoners of the identities they publicly create. If you constantly present yourself as confident, admitting fear becomes uncomfortable. If you constantly present yourself as successful, showing failure feels threatening. If you always display happiness, acknowledging sadness may feel like breaking character. The audience begins influencing what emotions you are allowed to show. A person who doesn't build their identity around social media may avoid much of this pressure. They don't have to perform happiness when they aren't happy. They don't have to prove confidence when they feel uncertain. They don't have to display success while they're still struggling to create it. Their private reality can remain separate from public expectations. This doesn't mean people who post photos are fake, and it doesn't mean people who avoid photos are automatically authentic. Someone can post frequently and still be completely genuine. Someone can avoid social media and still care deeply about other people's opinions. The behavior itself isn't enough to determine the psychology. What matters is the relationship between the person and the image they present. When someone can post a photo without needing approval, there is freedom. When someone can avoid posting without fear of judgment, there is freedom. The healthiest position isn't necessarily complete visibility or complete privacy. It is having enough independence that neither choice controls your sense of identity. People who don't post their photos may simply have decided that their real life deserves more attention than their digital representation. They don't need a profile to constantly remind themselves who they are. They don't need a collection of images to prove that they experienced something. They don't need strangers to understand them immediately. They allow themselves to remain complicated, unfinished, changing, and sometimes unknown, without feeling pressured to turn every part of that process into a public identity. People who rarely post their photos often have a highly selective approach to who gets access to their personal lives. They may understand something that social media makes easy to forget. Just because someone can see you does not mean they know you. And just because someone follows you does not mean they deserve access to everything happening behind the scenes. For these people, privacy is not necessarily about hiding. It can be about choosing carefully who is allowed to come closer. Modern social media encourages the opposite behavior. One post can expose a personal moment to hundreds or thousands of people simultaneously. Friends, acquaintances, co-workers, distant relatives, strangers, and people you barely remember from years ago can all receive the same information. The boundaries between different parts of life become blurred. Someone from your past can see your present. Someone you barely know can learn about your relationships. Someone you don't trust can discover your routines, interests, goals, and personal milestones. A selective person may find this unnecessary. They understand that access should have levels. Not everyone needs the same information. A stranger might know your name. An acquaintance might know what you do. A friend might know more about your personality. A close friend might know your struggles. Someone you deeply trust may know things that almost nobody else knows. Each level represents a different degree of intimacy. This is why people who don't post much can sometimes maintain very small circles while still having meaningful relationships. They aren't necessarily interested in being known by everyone. They may care more about being understood by the right people. There is a significant psychological difference between wanting widespread attention and wanting genuine connection. One seeks quantity, the other seeks depth. Social media can create an illusion of closeness because people constantly see one another's lives. You might watch someone's stories every day and feel like you know them. You might see their vacations, celebrations, opinions, relationships, and routines. But watching someone's life is not the same as being part of it. Digital visibility can create familiarity without trust. The selective person may recognize this distinction. They don't confuse access to information with access to the person. Someone can know where you went without knowing what you felt. Someone can see your relationship without understanding it. Someone can see your success without knowing what it cost you. Someone can follow you for years without ever becoming someone you genuinely trust. There is also a psychological benefit to limiting access. It reduces unnecessary judgment. The more people know about your life, the more opinions you potentially invite. Everyone has an interpretation. Someone may misunderstand your relationship. Someone may criticize your choices. Someone may compare their life to yours. Someone may gossip about information you considered harmless. A private person reduces these opportunities by simply not providing unlimited information. This doesn't mean they are afraid of judgment. Sometimes they simply recognize that not every opinion deserves consideration. If someone isn't involved in your life, their interpretation of your life may have very little practical importance. Why give emotional energy to opinions from people who don't know the circumstances behind your decisions? Selective people can also protect their goals this way. When a goal is announced too early, outside opinions can interfere with internal motivation. People may question it, discourage it, compete with it, or simply create expectations around it. Keeping a goal private allows you to work without constantly managing other people's reactions. The same principle applies to personal struggles. Not every difficult moment needs to become public information. Some people prefer to process problems with one trusted person rather than hundreds of spectators. They don't want sympathy from everyone. They want understanding from someone who actually matters. There is something powerful about knowing that certain parts of your life belong exclusively to you and the people you trust. It creates boundaries, and boundaries communicate something important. Access is earned through trust, consistency, respect, and genuine connection. A person who rarely posts may therefore be operating with a simple internal rule. Not everyone gets the same version of me. The public version can remain limited. The private version is reserved for people who have demonstrated that they can handle it. This doesn't make someone cold, antisocial, or secretive. In many cases, it simply means they understand that intimacy loses meaning when it is given indiscriminately. If everyone receives the same level of access, then access itself becomes meaningless. The most important relationships are often built away from the public eye. They are created through conversations nobody records, experiences nobody photographs, and moments that never become posts. The people closest to you don't need constant updates because they aren't spectators. They are participants. And when someone becomes comfortable deciding who gets access, rather than allowing an algorithm or audience to decide for them, their personal life becomes less about being visible and more about being intentional, selective, and deeply connected to the people who have actually earned a place inside it. Not posting photos on social media can mean many different things, and one of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that silence automatically equals confidence. It doesn't. The same behavior can come from completely different psychological places. One person may avoid posting because they genuinely don't care what other people think. Another may avoid posting because they are deeply afraid of being judged. From the outside, both people look identical. They rarely upload pictures, but internally, their motivations could not be more different. This is why behavior should never be interpreted without understanding the emotion behind it. A person who doesn't post may be protecting their privacy, rejecting the need for validation, or simply finding social media unimportant. But they may also be uncomfortable with their appearance, afraid of criticism, worried about comparison, or uncertain about how others perceive them. The action is only the surface. The motivation underneath is where the psychology becomes interesting. Consider someone who takes a photograph but never uploads it because they don't like how they look. They may compare themselves with carefully edited images online and conclude that they aren't attractive enough. They may see other people's bodies, lifestyles, vacations, relationships, and achievements and constantly feel behind. Eventually, avoiding photographs becomes a way of avoiding discomfort. They aren't choosing privacy because they feel free. They're choosing invisibility because visibility feels threatening. That is very different from someone who looks at the same social media environment and thinks, I simply don't need this. One person is controlled by fear of judgment. The other is unaffected by judgment. One avoids exposure because they feel vulnerable. The other avoids exposure because they don't consider it necessary. This distinction can be understood through choice. Psychological confidence isn't about always being visible. It is about having freedom over whether you become visible. A confident person can post a photograph without needing approval, and they can also decide not to post one without worrying about what people will think. Their self-worth remains stable either way. Insecurity often removes that freedom. The person may think about posting, but imagine criticism before it happens. They may wonder whether people will think they look awkward, unattractive, unsuccessful, boring, or different. They might compare their appearance to everyone else's and decide that remaining invisible is safer. The absence of a photograph then becomes less about preference and more about self-protection. There is another form of insecurity that can be difficult to recognize. Some people post constantly because they are insecure, not because they are confident. They may need continuous reassurance that they look good, that they are desirable, that their life is interesting, or that other people care about them. Their constant visibility can be another form of fear. If the attention disappears, the uncertainty returns. This is why posting frequently doesn't automatically indicate confidence, just as not posting doesn't automatically indicate insecurity. Both behaviors can be healthy or unhealthy, depending on the psychological relationship behind them. The healthiest position is psychological independence. You can share without performing. You can remain private without hiding. You can receive compliments without depending on them. You can receive criticism without allowing it to define you. You can appear online without becoming obsessed with your image. And you can disappear without feeling that your identity is disappearing with you. People often assume that confidence means being comfortable with attention. But a deeper form of confidence is being comfortable without attention. You don't need to constantly prove your appearance, success, personality, or social status. At the same time, you aren't terrified of being seen. You simply decide when visibility serves you and when it doesn't. The question, therefore, isn't does this person post pictures? The better question is why don't they? Are they protecting something valuable? Are they uninterested in public attention? Are they avoiding comparison? Are they afraid of judgment? Are they comfortable with themselves? Or are they struggling with an image they don't know how to accept? Once you understand that distinction, social media behavior becomes much more complicated than it first appears. Because the real sign of confidence isn't whether someone chooses the spotlight or the shadows. It is whether they are free to choose either one without allowing other people's opinions to control their sense of worth. And that is the difference between hiding and choosing privacy, between avoiding attention and simply not needing it, between insecurity and independence. When your identity remains stable, whether people are watching or not, you stop living according to the audience and you start living according to your own standards.